anarchic and funny.
Appealing, quirky characters.
Is it a British sensibility? I think it is.
It makes remarks about society.
It would be a crime for this art form not to be celebrated.
It's 36 years since the launch of the countercultural science fiction magazine 2000 AD. This year, the home of Halo Jones, of Strontium Dog and Judge Dredd, has been invited to one of the premier events on the literary calendar, the Edinburgh International Book Festival. Behind me is the warehouse in which 2000 AD is made. We've come here to find out how their hard-edged version of the future has entered the mainstream.
2000 AD is a science fiction anthology comic which has been going since 1977 on the back of Star Wars and a big interest in sci-fi films. 2000 AD was also very much influenced by a kind of the punk sensibility of around that time. So it was very anti-authority, very irreverent, and it was very much into grim and gritty anti-heroes. But yeah, here we have the first issue of 2000 AD.
So what was in the number one?
This is Invasion, Britain invaded by the Volks. This is Bill Savage here. This is like the East End lorry driver leading resistance. The very first issue of 2000 AD, you had the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Lady Shirley Brown, who looked exactly like Margaret Thatcher, being executed on the steps of St Paul's by the Volgans, and that set 2000 AD stalled out right from the beginning.
I think what attracted me most to 2000 AD was a peculiarly British irreverence, at the same time combined with a peculiarly British outrage.
Right, Prog 412, 6th of April 1985. The Dredd story is about a construction robot that's gone on the rampage.
They would take their anger and they would also make it funny.
Dredd manages to defeat the giant robot by making it punch its own head off.
And I think the combination of action-adventure, anger and humour was what made, what really made 2000 AD work for me.
This is the issue that will be going on sale next week. Yeah. So Prog 1841. Pat Mills, who was the founding editor of 2000 and still writes for it today, he created characters like ABC Warriors and Nemesis the Warlock and Slain. He's very much into the dark humour and the anti-authority. And one of the things that you really try for a good-looking issue of 2000 AD is to really mix up the styles, so you feel like you're getting 5 separate stories. Writer and artist don't often converse. They may do if they're working on a series together, but if it's usually a case of the writer won't see the art until the story's published. Here we have the next episode of Age of the Wolf, or post-apocalyptic werewolf story. So the artist sent us Photoshop files. They're imported into an InDesign document for the letterer to letter. And then I go through the scripts against the artwork, and then the whole issue is put together in InDesign. Once it's all designed up, it's turned into PDFs and uploaded to the printer. Okay. And then that's another issue done. When 2000 AD was originally produced on film, and so it's kept as physical film.
Actual sheets of plastic?
Yes, like transparencies. This is basically for any reprints we do of old stories. When
you're kind of collecting them together?
Yes, the film is scanned and then it's collected up. So this is basically every prog. So it's something we kind of tried to catalogue and try to over the course of the years digitise. So we've got it nice and convenient, but it's still an awful lot of film. Let's see what's in the box for Prog 8. A negative like this, and this is a. You can see it's flesh pages. That's the cover.
American comics, until that point, had always been high on heroes. The idea that there are people who will come in and sort out your troubles for you while dressed in spandex.
It's a very kind of British, slightly downbeat kind of kind of view on the future, which kind of is probably closer to some of the darker side of things like Doctor Who.
Judge Dredd dealt with racism and xenophobia with like mutants and things like that, and Strontium Dog was very good at showing discrimination. It was about a mutant bounty hunter. And Nemesis the Warlock was about aliens that were being persecuted by the humans. So there's lots of sort of heavy stuff, but it was all couched in a comic, yeah, all subtext, all in a sci-fi comic that a 12-year-old could pick up and enjoy.
At the time, something like Judge Dredd, which was, I think, kind of loosely based on the kind of like Dirty Harry films, you know, like kind of Clint Eastwood kind of not talkative character going around kind of distributing justice. I think that really appealed to the sick minds of kind of 11 and 12-year-olds.
Some of the greatest 2000 AD strips were simply anarchic and funny. Alan Moore's DR and Quinch stories, for example, are just, you know, a couple of juvenile delinquents with A-bombs.
So there's always a certain sense of pushing against the boundaries. But over the years, the readership has grown up and the comic has matured with it. And we've seen stories come that have gradually pushed back those boundaries. The Slain story, The Horned God, for example, with Simon Bisley painted artwork, I think was a watershed in terms of levels of violence and nudity that began to show 2000 AD as more aimed towards an adult audience.
Comics can show, for a start, they can show the enormous kind of breadth of subject matter, styles, the kind of small stories, the more personal stories, to the really kind of you know, like major issues, like someone like Joe Sacco, like going to war-torn zones and kind of like writing graphic novels about the human side of things, is just as relevant to, you know, like to kind of you know, like major journalistic works, because they kind of tell their more personal stories that even kids could read and maybe understand.
So what's your kind of audience you've got in mind when you're commissioning?
We're kind of looking at sort of mid-20s upwards, really. I mean, you know, kids can still pick it up. The fact that whether they want to or not is another matter. Is because that's a constant thing we're fighting against. Is getting younger readers to enjoy comics. 2000 AD has its own app, which is available through iTunes, and so each week's issue is available on the Apple newsstand. So people can take out a subscription or they can buy individual issues, and
that's pretty much the same magazine.
Yes, exactly. It's exactly the same magazine being converted, and 2000 AD should be a comic that kids would hopefully graduate onto from like a humour title.
But it's not 8-year-olds anymore.
No. It's probably to probably start reading it around teenagers.
To find 2000 AD appearing at the Edinburgh Books Festival, I think is entirely appropriate. I think it is a comic. Comics as a medium are always. It's always been associated with children because it started out as an entertainment form for children. But it has a very, very honourable tradition of being something far more than that. As I said, you can make a case for it being one of the most sophisticated storytelling mediums in the world because it is both active and passive. It demands more of a reader than either novels or movies.
When our book Montague Terrace was accepted for Jonathan Kay, we felt extremely privileged in a lot of ways, because going to the offices to be interviewed and have a look around and seeing all the names of literary giants and people around us, you know, we kind of did feel slightly in awe.
We've been talking about graphic novels for 20 plus years, and in fact it's sort of often a misnomer because very, very little comic material is produced written as novel form. What people think of as graphic novels tend to be trade paperback collections of stuff that was printed in serial form anyway, and you know, it's I think the only change there that makes a real difference is that the comics are no longer ephemeral, because you can't, you know, something that would have been thrown away before now gets collected into a nice paperback edition, sits on the shelf in Waterstones and will last there for years and years and years.
2000 AD had a gloriously, because it was a weekly, because it was occurring so far under the radar, it had an attitude to pop culture in which anything could be ripped off, parodied, thrown in there. So if you were going to point at any magazine or any comic that it was a descendant of. I think it had as much to do with Mad Magazine. You know, it had, even though Mad Magazine was classically humor, and 2000 AD was adventure strips, the attitude, I think, carried over.
It's like 2000 AD, right from the word go, was this most wonderful distillation of what British comics and British imagination was about, all in one place, and has stayed there. And as I say, it's the fact that it did it and then stayed there that I think makes it a really extraordinary sort of thing. And it's still taking risks all the time. You know, its longevity and its consistency has allowed it to be taken quite seriously.